Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Saturday Stories. I'm Claire Bernice, and this morning I am joining you from a rather tropical location, which is unusual, but so suitable for this beautiful book that John Rocco will be sharing with you. He's the awesome illustrator of this book, and his wife, Hayley Rocco, wrote the book. And we find out more about how the book was created, all the research that went into it, and all about many things that are connected to this special book, because it's not just a incredibly beautiful homage to Sir David Attenborough, who was a British naturalist and television host on Nature. You may have all seen him. If you haven't heard of him, if you're younger, do check out his shows and videos on him. Well, videos, I guess it's not videos anymore, but go to YouTube, you can find them there. And you'll find out so many things about the planet and the animals that live on a wonderful planet. And John and Hayley have actually done other book series that are really interesting, and you can find out about very unusual animals. For example, there's Hello, I'm a Loris. This is part of the Meet the Wild Things series, where there's many books about more unusual animals. But they do a lot with the environment, Hayley and John. So you'll find out more on John's website. And Tim behind the scenes will be putting into our chat any emails and website addresses so that you can go and find out more yourselves. So some of the things that they do are actually, they are part of, you created this, it's called the CBCC, Children's Book Creators for Conservation. So do check those books out. That's all about more conservation for our planet and animals that live here. And well, John, what can I say? It's such a pleasure to have you here this morning. So John has been creating art for many, many years. He graduated from the Rhode Island School of Art, which is in the area that he grew up in the northeast of the United States. And it's a fantastic art school. And from there, he learned
Rhode Island School of Design.
Oh, sorry, Rhode Island. What did I say?
But actually, I finished my education at School of Visual Arts in New York, so I did
yes,
a little
yes,
bit
yes.
of both.
Yes, RISD,
Yes.
School of Design, yes. So very good school. And yes, more art schools in Manhattan that we're very familiar with as well at the Society of Illustrators. So he's got a wonderful background and actually started as an art director working on movies. You may all have heard of Shrek, right? That he worked as an art director on that movie and many others, and also was part of a design team art directing for theme parks at Disney. So all those fun rides, he was creating those. So very much working in 3D as well as in 2D, but has always had a love for picture books and doing illustration. And as you'll see when we hear more about his books that he's created, there are many of them. I think I counted more than 20, and that's not even including all the book covers that he's done. He did the book covers for Percy Jackson, the Olympian series, which is a very, very beloved series. And if you haven't read those are incredible books. And also doing cover art is a very important part of an illustrator's design job, because they have to think of how am I going to create a picture for the front cover that's going to capture the story and also capture somebody's eye in a bookstore or in a library. And this is an example of how John has done another exceptional book cover. This is for Wild Places. So we see the young David Attenborough here as a child, and then we see it sort of surrounded by nature that becomes also much a part of his life. Well, there's more for me to tell you about John Rocco. He is a Caldecott Award winner, so he's also author and illustrator, and he won the Caldecott, which is the best award you can win for illustration of a picture book. That was in 2012 for Blackout. So John likes to also tell stories of real things that happened in his life as well. Blizzard was one of the stories that he wrote about his experience in a blizzard. Back when he was about 10, and what it was like to be without power and like food dwindling, and how he had to go out and find the food in his tennis shoes in the snow. But these experiences that you live through when you're a child really stay with you, and they make beautiful books. So if you haven't read that one, check that out. I think when we go through this presentation this morning, you'll see how many really interesting and beautifully written and illustrated books have been created by John, and also a lot with his wife, Hayley. Do check out our website for all the events that are going on related to our exhibitions. For this morning, just to walk through new participants who are joining us, John will do a wonderful presentation. You'll sit back and enjoy seeing pictures of all his works that he's done and how he created the book and how the research for the pictures were part of his job to create the book, and more about him and his interest in arts, and also his very big passion for saving our planet. So do pay attention to all of that because it's very important. As you can see, I'm in nature here and it's wonderful. And do have your drawing materials ready. John will do a drawing demonstration of how he would create an illustration for the book. He always starts in pencils, drawing his sketches. He draws it all out, but then he also combines that with digital. So then he'll do some textures and coloring, and we'll see that also in the workshop. If you have questions, please do write your questions or any comments. Let us know where you're joining from. It's always exciting to hear that people are joining from different parts of the United States or across the oceans. Do let us know. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over this program this morning to John. Welcome, John. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Clara. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be working with Society of Illustrators on this little program. And I'm happy to talk to you today about my career and about this book, Wild Places, that I did with my wife, Hayley, amongst other things. And we're going to try to do some drawing. And I'll show you a little bit at the end of how I work digitally in Photoshop to create the images for these books. So I am going to share my screen and share a presentation that I've put together. And here we go. I can start. So I grew up in Rhode Island, which is where I am right now. And I grew up in a town called Barrington, right near a saltwater tributary or river of the Narragansett Bay. And when I was about 11 years old, I ended up getting a job working on and don't laugh at my hair, I had a big afro. And I got a job working on a commercial shellfishing boat. And that experience was incredible. I loved it. I worked out on the water. So this is a picture taken from that time period. And these were the commercial shellfishing boats. And basically they would have these long, long rakes that would drag the bottom of the ocean. You would pull this rake through the mud and you would dig up these clams, which would sit in the bottom of the mud. In Rhode Island, we call them quahogs, and they're a hard shell clam they're used in clam chowder or clam cakes, different things like that, if you've ever had an experience of eating that. And I loved it. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. This is my job. And so when I was 16, I got my own boat. There she is, the Rainy Day Woman. Not very seaworthy. In fact, when I was about 18 and I had just graduated high school, I was working in the winter and ended up taking a big wave over the bow and the boat sunk. Luckily, I was close to shore, so I swam to shore, and the next day I went off to college at the University of Rhode Island because I didn't want to be a fisherman anymore. And I had a roommate named Fred Lynch, and Fred was an illustrator. And he would sit in his room all day and paint these beautiful pictures and get paid for it. And it sort of blew my mind because I didn't really, up to that point, didn't really think about illustration all that much. You know, I would see illustrations everywhere. You could see illustrations on billboards, on t-shirts, on lunchboxes. Everywhere you looked, there was art. And I never really thought that, oh, there's someone sitting down making that art. And I didn't really see it as a job, but suddenly Fred showed me how you could actually do this and make a living at it. And so he had all of these books, actually Society of Illustrator annuals, which had all of the best illustration of each year in these big bound books. And so I would pour through these books and look at illustrators like Bernie Fuchs and Murray Tinkelman and Brad Holland and uh, Anita Coons. And I just fell in love with all of this art. And I came across this one guy named Bill Nelson. And he had a book called Finishing the Hat. And what I loved about this book and his art was that in the back of the book, he had an explanation on how he approached making his artwork. And it was something that I could really understand and really sink my teeth into. And he said, yeah, I use Canson colored paper and I use colored pencils and I start with a medium tone and use my dark colored pencils to make my darks. And then I use light colored pencils to make my light. So I start with that medium value and I push and pull with light to create these images. And I immediately ran off to the store and I started creating my own sort of Bill Nelson-like illustrations. And it was a way for me to learn how to illustrate, one, but also to put together a portfolio so that I could get into art school. Um, and so these are some of the images that I was creating at that time, which helped get me into art school. And in fact, if you want to go to Rhode Island School of Design, I don't know if this is a prerequisite anymore, but when I applied, you had to draw a bicycle. That was part of your application process. So it wasn't about your SATs or your test scores. It was, can you draw a bicycle? And I think it's a good assignment because there's so many organic shapes like those wires and things like that, and round shapes, but there's also more straight shapes. And so they really want to know, can you draw? And so this was the bicycle that I drew to get into school. Um, After I spent a couple of years at Rhode Island School of Design, I ended up moving to New York City. I had a teacher that said, you need to go to New York. And so I went to New York and I got into the School of Visual Arts. And while I was working there, or while I was going to school there, I was working in a bar called Charlie O's. You see it there on the left. And it's right in the theater district where they put on all the big Broadway shows in New York City. And one night when I was working there, um, I had this piece of art that I had done in school. It was a triptych, and it was a pencil illustration. I was very much into the artwork of Chris Van Allsburg, so I was trying to get that sort of soft, layered pencil look. Um, and I had this triptych behind the bar. Tri meaning three pictures, right? Triptych. Um, and these, so the reason I had it behind the bar is because many times there were art directors from advertising agencies that would come into the bar that I would meet, and I would basically show them my artwork and sometimes get a job from these pictures that I would show them because they would get all excited and say, oh, you know how to draw. Maybe you could do this job for me. So one night, our bar was hosting the Tony Awards after party. And the Tony Awards are like the Academy Awards for theater. And so I got to meet the actress, comedian Whoopi Goldberg, and that's me with the bow tie. And there's Whoopi, and she loved my artwork and said, you know what, we need to turn this into a book. And so together we made a picture book called Alice. And if you look very carefully, you can see my name on the cover, which was very, very, very exciting because I had just graduated college and I had already done my first book. And I got to put, like, the other bartender that I worked with, he became one of the characters in the book. And so it was really, really fun. But I wasn't sure that I was ready to do more books at the time. I wanted to kind of explore what I could do with this art degree. And it turns out I realized after doing many different jobs that I wasn't just an illustrator, but I was a storyteller. Um, and I did that through imagery. And so when you think of yourself that way, then there's so many jobs you can do. If you know how to tell a story visually, then there's a lot of things you can apply that to. So as Claire said, I ended up working for Walt Disney Imagineering for many years, designing theme park rides, um, both at Epcot and Disney World and Disneyland. Um, and I also ended up working on films, as Claire said, for DreamWorks. We turned the book Shrek by William Steig into Shrek, that many of you are all familiar with. And that was a very interesting experience because you end up doing lots and lots of drawing. I was a pre-production art director, which basically meant help designing all the different things that you would see in the film. Um, Early on, Shrek had hair. Many people didn't know this, but it was going to be voiced by a different actor. So the design was a little bit different. Um, so after doing all of these different projects, I decided that, I really loved books and I wanted to get back into doing books. So I moved back to New York City from Los Angeles and really put all my heart and soul into making books. And so for the last 20 years, I've been making a lot of picture books. Some of them I've written myself, some of them were written by other people. Um, and I think I've illustrated about 30 books at this point. And some of them are picture books, and then some of them are books for older readers, as well as Claire had said, lots and lots of book jackets. I think I've done maybe 50 or 60 book jackets over the years, which is a lot of fun and a challenge into itself, because the idea of creating a book jacket is creating something that I always think of it as like creating a promise. Like, I promise if you like this image, you will like this book, and you will, sort of a gateway into wanting to read a book. And, we all say, oh, you can't judge a book by its cover, but we do anyway. We just, because there's nothing else to really look at unless you start reading it. I like to read the first few lines of a book because that really tells me, is this a book I'm going to enjoy? Does it have a good hook that's going to suck me in? And so I try to create that hook for the cover of a book. And with Wild Places, very similar to, designing a book jacket, I wanted to create an image that sort of drew you in and felt like, oh, you're following this boy into this world. Um, and if you look at the book itself and you take off the jacket, you will see that it's David Attenborough as an old man, sort of coming out of the jungle. Um, and David turned 99 a couple of weeks ago. So, and he's still working, he's still making documentaries. So during the pandemic, Hayley, my wife, had read the book A Life on Our Planet by David Attenborough. And uh, what's amazing about David is that he started traveling the world in the 1950s, when airplane travel was just becoming a thing where you could just fly places. Um, and before that, people took boats to go places. It took a really long time to travel to different parts of the world. But he started doing documentaries way back then, and he has seen almost every corner of the earth. And as he got older, he saw how much the world had changed during his lifetime, um, from when he was born in the 1920s to now. Over that 100 years, the world has changed dramatically. And so Hayley and I wanted to create a book that kind of showed how the world has changed over the course of one man's lifetime, and what better man to sort of tell this story with than David Attenborough, the presenter of all of these incredible documentaries that many of us have watched over the years. So with that said, I'd love to read to you my book, our book, my wife's and I book, Wild Places. And I'm going to start off in the voice of David Attenborough, and maybe you'll even recognize it.
Yay. That was wonderful.
We have a quote at the beginning of the book: "If we take care of nature, nature will take care of us," which is one of David Attenborough's quotes. This is our planet. And on our planet, there are 8.7 million types of animals. One of those types is human, and one of those humans is a man named David. When David was born, more than 2/3 of our planet was covered in wild places. That was where most of the animals lived. The other third was where the humans lived. David has spent his lifetime showing us how every living thing on this planet is connected. And David has hope that if we all do our part, together we can bring back the wild places. So when I don't know, you might recognize a few people in this, Jane Goodall and others. When I'm working on a picture book, you know what, and that someone else has written, like my wife, for instance, I'm just basically given the text. You know, this is where it all begins, right? So we have the text for a particular page. Um, and this one is the page where he's looking for fish and birds. And I need to come up with an image or images for this particular spread. And so the first thing I thought of was, well, let's have him standing there looking into the water, and maybe he only sees one fish. And then we'll take this second page and do a bird's eye view of him looking up and maybe only seeing one bird. So this was my initial sketch. As you can see, it's very simple. You know, I just sort of doodle out what I think the page will look like. And as I looked at the page on the left, my art director actually said, you know, I don't like how the words are sitting. This group of words seem kind of pushed off into the corner. Maybe we can change him to more of a profile. So I changed it around, and this way you got to see the expression on his face. You had a lot more room for the text here. And so this was the final approved sketch. From there, I like to take reference photos. And for this, I just used myself, put on some clothes that seemed like the type of clothes David wore, which was usually some blue linen shirt and khaki pants, and had my wife take a couple photos of me that I could use as reference. Reference for me is critical. That's how I get the best results of my drawing, is using some sort of reference, whether it's live reference or photograph reference, or sometimes I'll actually build models to use as reference. So I collected a lot of reference for these particular images, and then I was able to do a pencil drawing, which is just pencil on paper. And the way I work is I'll do a pencil drawing and I'll bring it into my computer and I'll paint the image digitally in the computer. And so for this one, you know, I'll start with the main subjects and then paint in the background. And later I'm going to show you how I layer these different background, foreground, and middle ground to kind of create the image. Also using textures, you can see there's a lot of texture in this water. And so I'll show you how I integrate textures into that. And, you know, as Claire said, my wife and I have been doing a lot of books together, and we've come out with a series of books about endangered animals because what happened was we really wanted to put focus on conservation, especially after doing the book Wild Places. And she had gone to South Africa to study the pangolin, which is, one of the places in the world where you can find these incredible, amazing creatures, which are highly, highly endangered. They're the most trafficked mammal on the planet because of their scales. Their scales are made of the same thing as our fingernails, but there are some people who believe that their scales are medicinal or can, have curative properties. So sadly, people will go and take these animals from their habitat, and we're losing so many that if it keeps going like this and nothing changes, these animals will become extinct in the next 5 to 10 years, meaning they will no longer exist, like the dinosaurs. And that is just horribly sad because these animals actually do an incredible job at maintaining the insect and termite populations in both Africa and Asia where they live. And so if you don't have these animals, then you're going to have too many termites and too many ants, and that creates an imbalance. And nature, when it's thriving, is all about balance of all the different animals that are in the ecosystems. So she came back from this trip, and we did this book about the pangolin, and we started doing many more. But she said, we have to bring more children's book people to South Africa because they're going to have this incredible conservation experience with an organization that we work with called Wild Tomorrow. And so we decided to put together this group that would bring children's book creators, both writers and illustrators. And this year we're actually going with some teachers, some educators, and some people that work in publishing, and with the idea that we're starting to make more books about conservation and conservation experiences, to really sort of create connections between readers like yourselves and the work that conservationists are doing in the field. So in 2023, we took our first trip with 7 other children's book creators. You may recognize some of them, like Brian Floca and Candy Fleming, Eric Roman, Jessica Lannon. So anyway, throughout the experience, we did all kinds of incredible things, like something called bird ringing, which is basically where you put tags on migratory birds, little metal rings that go around they're very lightweight aluminum rings that go around their feet. And when they're captured in other areas, scientists can learn more about where these birds are flying to, where they're going. So when you catch the birds in these mist nets that you'll see, these are drawings that were done in the field by both Corbin Wilkin and Jessica Lannon. But when you capture these birds in these mist nets, some of them already have rings. So then you can take that information down and find out where they came from. And other birds, we would add the rings to them. And then the best part was being able to release the birds. There's nothing like the feeling of letting a bird fly out of your hand and back into the wild. Another thing we were involved in was transporting animals from one area to another. And in South Africa, basically, speaking of animals, my dog just came upstairs. In South Africa, all the game reserves, all the areas where wild animals are basically fenced in. And that creates an area where you don't have as much human animal conflict, like wild elephants trampling through somebody's farm. The elephants are in a particular game reserve. And when you do that, you have to make sure that there's a balance of animals in each game reserve. So part of conservationist job is to move animals from one area to another, so that there is a good balance of the ecosystem. For example, there's a type of tree in South Africa, and the smaller animals like impala will eat the leaves from the bottom of the tree, and then a larger animal like a kudu will eat the leaves from the middle of the tree. And of course, the tallest animals, the giraffes, will eat the leaves from the top of the tree. So if you have an imbalance of those three animals, that could hurt the tree, because if all the leaves at the bottom are killed, and it doesn't create an even balance of how it's being harvested by these animals. So a lot of that is about moving animals around, making sure you have the balance, making sure the animals are safe when you do that. Another thing we got involved in was the collaring of a matriarch elephant. So every elephant herd has a matriarch, and that is the mama, the grandmother, if you will, of the herd. And she's the one with all the knowledge. She's the one that they've passed down. All elephants pass down information generationally, like where a certain water hole might be, or where there's danger. So she will have all that information. And so the herd sticks with the matriarch. They go where she goes. If she stops, they stop. If she goes forward, they go forward. So when you want to know how your herd is doing in these giant reserves and you can't find your elephants, you need to know where they are. You need to know they're safe. So they'll put a collar which has all kinds of information that can be given through GPS and whatnot to the rangers who are trying to protect these animals. So we had the experience of helping put a collar. This collar had AI on it, so it could tell if the matriarch was pregnant. It could tell if she wasn't eating enough. It could tell all of this information and give it back to the rangers. And you can see the collar on this elephant right here. This is actually a lead weight that keeps the other part of the collar at the top, because it's solar powered, so it'll get the solar energy to keep going and last as long as possible. So another experience we had was actually dehorning rhinos. Now, like the pangolin scales, rhino horns are a much wanted thing in certain parts of the world, even though they're made out of the same thing. They're made out of keratin, which is what your hair and your fingernails are made out of. But people think it's medicine, or it gives them power or something. I don't know. It's fairly ridiculous that these animals are being slaughtered for their horns. And so one of the preventative measures is to actually clip the horns. And because the horns, they're not necessary for their survival. In fact, it's been found that rhinos that have their horns trimmed, is what it's called, will actually produce more offspring. So that's good, because we're losing so many rhinos. So we had the experience of helping participate in this conservation effort. And when that happens, you're also taking blood samples, you're taking skin samples, and to get as much information about this animal as possible, so you can help protect it in the wild. And there's the rhino who's woken up after she had her horn trimmed, and she went back to her mom, and they were all happy, and that rhino will be safe until that horn grows back. And that usually, after a couple years, they have to go and trim the horn again, because it's like a fingernail. It just grows like a fingernail. So one of the most coolest experiences I had when I was in South Africa was actually help capture two female cheetah. They were sisters who had escaped from their reserve. Somehow they hopped the fence or climbed a tree that was near a fence and jumped over. I'm not exactly sure how they escaped, but we had to go capture them, which is done using a tranquilizer gun. And then we put them in the back of a truck. Where you can see my hat is over the face of the cheetah, and that's because they don't necessarily close their eyes when they have the tranquilizer in them. And so you want to protect their eyes from the sun and keep them calm while they're sleeping. And then there they are back at the reserve that they belong in, which was just an amazing experience when you've done something to help an animal and you're in the wild like that. There's nothing like it. So with that said, I'm going to stop the sharing of this, and I want to show you a little bit. Well, I think we'll do a little drawing now.
So, John, I was just so enraptured in watching everything. I mean, I know our participants were really inspired and very engaged with what you were telling us, not just about you and your drawing, but everything you're doing as well tomorrow. It's just fantastic. Oh,
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We're going back in September with another group of this time it's going to be Hayley, myself, and eight other people, seven other people.
so
Yeah,
how do people get involved? Can they get involved, volunteer? And is this something that's
yeah. So
website?
if you go to our website, if you're a children's book creator or you work in the children's book field as a publisher or something like that, we have a website called meetthewildthings.com, and there's a place called CBCC on there, and you can find out more. We haven't created dates yet for our next trip. This year's trip is fully booked. And our next trip, as soon as we announce it, then there'll be a place for applications and so forth. But if you just want to volunteer and go on one of these trips with Wild Tomorrow, you can go to wildtomorrow.org, and they have volunteer trips. It's the same experience that we'll be having, but we just do it as a group of children's book creators, so that we can kind of use those experiences to create books and be surrounded by, people who are working in the same field and so forth. But yeah, in fact, they have a trip coming up in October, which still has 6 spots open. And apparently it's going to be an amazing trip. They have some great things that they're going to be doing, and it's called a volunteer trip, but you're actually there's not a lot of work involved. You're experiencing, at least with Wild Tomorrow and how they do it, they do an incredible job because you're exposed to all of these different aspects of conservation.
The awareness that's so important.
Yeah, and not only are you learning what the conservationists are doing, but you go on safari almost every day, and it's very reasonable cost wise. They put together such an amazing experience, and the land that they have secured is they have their own game reserve, which is like 5,000 acres, and so you stay on the reserve itself, but you also go to other reserves to help, because their organization supports many different reserves, supporting not only the rangers and the wildlife, but they support the schools and the orphanages that are in the areas as well. So they have an approach that's about conservation beyond just helping the animals in the wild spaces, but helping the people and helping, it's a
ranging, wide reaching, and yeah.
yeah, it's a wide-reaching approach, and yeah,
Please,
it's a wonderful organization, and my wife and I are ambassadors for it now,
yes,
we love working with them. So
yeah, one can tell that you have.
yeah, so go check out Wild Tomorrow
Yes,
because they're doing
right,
some incredible things.
yes.
And okay, so I thought it would be fun to draw a wild place for some of you who are not experienced illustrators. This would be a simple exercise. Here, I'm just drawing on old gift wrap that I found. Doesn't matter what you draw on. You can draw on anything. And I'm just going to use a Sharpie just so you can see it. But I thought, as I have here in the book, I have some cranes that I drew. I don't know if you can see them right
Yes, yeah,
there.
I have my phone.
These cranes. So I thought they're a very cool animal. They're beautiful birds. I love watching them. We have some down the street that live. In fact, they're herons, which is a type of crane, blue herons that live on a little lake down the street, and I love seeing them fishing and flying around. So let's try to draw it. And again, you know, I've drawn this many times, so don't feel bad if yours doesn't look like mine. It's fine. We're just gonna have fun. And we're gonna draw. I like to think about things when I'm drawing as drawing shapes. And so we're gonna draw some shapes and turn it into a little scene, or I hope we are. So I start out with drawing the bird's head. And so for that, we're just going to draw an oval like that, very simple. And then from there, we're going to draw the beak, which is basically just a long triangle like that. And don't worry about the details. You can go back and put in the details you like. Now the necks on cranes are very interesting because they sort of fold up when they're flying like this. But they have these long necks so that they can fish, so they can almost like a cobra or something. But when they're flying, they fold them up into this aerodynamic shape, which kind of looks like an S. So if we start at the top of the oval and come down and just bring it back this way a little bit, and then follow that shape on the other side, we get this sort of S shape. And from there, we can do sort of a half oval as the body of the bird right here. And then at the top of this S, it's going to go right into the wing. And so what we're going to do is draw two lines, two arched lines like that, which will give us the front of the wing. And the back of the wing, we know, is a bunch of feathers, right? So we can just come down the line, and they don't have to be perfect, but just a bunch of feathers, right? And then we have to draw the tail. And the tail is, again, it's almost like the beak. It's that triangle shape. And you can add shading if you'd like. You can add another row of feathers. You can even add the other wing in the background. And then the eye. And you can continue with that and draw, you know, all the feathers and start shading it in if you'd like, or whatever. And we can draw another one, this time with the wings maybe down. Because if you draw two of them, I found, and one of them has their wing up and the other one has their wing down, you get that sense of flight. Right? So the only difference is basically this wing is down. You can draw the second wing if you'd like. And then the tail. You can even draw the feet, which they tuck back there. So now we have a couple of cranes and they're flying, but where are they flying? I don't know. So I like to put in, let's I love drawing these cumulonimbus
Yes, cumulus nimbus.
nimbulus clouds,
Fluffy ones.
which are these tall, like,
Yeah,
big,
fluffy.
big fluffy clouds, and you can have them.
Wonderful to see you break it down into shapes like this, because for the kids in the audience, when you're looking at a photograph, it's a lot of detail, but when you see it with just the lines, you can see how effective it is just to turn it into the shapes and lines. This is very
Just taking simple shape. I mean, I try whenever I'm drawing, I'm trying to think of what are the shapes that make up this thing.
yes.
Then I can get into more and more detail and refine it and refine it and refine it. And then finally we can add like so these types of birds, they love marshy areas. So if we draw some grasses down here, and then sort of a horizon line, and then of course the reflection of the grass in the water gives us kind of a little bit of an environment. So now we have a wild place.
We have a question from Riley from Austin, Texas.
Sure.
I was asking, did you like drawing nature when you were a child?
Hi, Riley, first off. Secondly, so did I like drawing nature as a child? You know what? I didn't draw much as a child. When I did draw, I would copy the comics that came in the newspaper. So every Sunday when we got the newspaper, there was a Sunday comics section with like Peanuts and Beetle Bailey and these comic strips. And I remember drawing those, and that was my biggest memory of drawing. I spent most of my time fishing or in a fishing boat or
so
something.
observing it in nature itself. Yeah, that's
I was in the nature and I was looking at it, but I didn't really pursue drawing all that much until I lived with Fred and saw him working as an illustrator. Yeah.
Yes. So you obviously you went to art school. So did you start drawing in high school to prepare for that? And that's when you started to get a bit more
I
focused.
mean, I did draw in high school, as many high schools have an art class. I took the art class and I made some pretty crummy drawings, I'm sure. I don't consider myself like the best draftsman in the world. And when I say draftsman, like the ability to just draw something, there's some people that can just draw incredible. And every time they sit down, they draw. I had to work at it very hard to draw anything decent.
Natural. I mean, okay, there you go, everybody. So it's practice, but you do make it look effortless, and you're not just
Well,
being characters that are human, or even more the comic style, or imaginary characters, but real animals. You've got to capture the essence of those animals, even if you're doing it in a more picture book fun way.
yeah, I mean,
Realistically, so you can do it all, actually, John.
oh, well,
You can.
that's very kind of you. But like here's two picture books that I worked on last year. And the artwork is very different. So here's a painting of sloth
Yes,
swimming
wonderful.
in the water,
Yes,
and that's obviously a lot different than a picture of a chipmunk
yes,
who
which is
loves
more,
books.
more whimsical
Um,
version, but we recognize
yeah, so
still, yes.
there is a lot of change, and then of course there's the Percy Jackson books that I've done, which is
Yeah,
much more middle grade fantasy.
yeah,
Um, I like challenging myself to draw different types of illustration. I think I think when you see the art, you still know it's me, maybe.
Yes,
But
yes,
I don't necessarily go at it with, I want people to know this is my style, or this
yeah,
is my technique, or this is, I don't really have that because I'm always just going with, what does this story need? How do I support this story visually?
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's the most important part, is like, how can I tell this story in the best way possible? Is it with a very much more realistic image, or is it with something more cartoony? Um,
yeah,
and luckily there's been so many great artists over the years that I
yeah,
kind of turn to them to look at, well, how did this artist paint that tree? Like, how did NC Wyeth get that beautiful dappled light on this
yeah,
tree? Or how did Jesse Wilcox Smith draw this particular child and make it look so lifelike? And so
yes,
I always go back to the history. That's why a place like Society of Illustrators is so important, because you got
yeah,
to carry on the history of all of these
exactly.
incredible illustrators going back to the 1800s and even before. Uh,
Yes,
and so, those, having that resource and being able to look at, like, how did they do this? Um,
yeah,
so I always think, like, if I'm going to do a scene that has a tree in it, okay, who paints the best trees? I'm going to go look at their artwork, and then I'm going to look at photographs of trees. And so once I surround myself with all of that visual knowledge, then
mhm,
when I go to paint my tree, hopefully, it comes out halfway decent. I don't know. Like, I do my best.
it definitely does. It
And
definitely does. So,
yeah, I love it. I love creating images, and it's very happy and satisfying when you create something that really works. And 9 times out of 10, I'm not satisfied with the whole painting, but there might be a little portion of it that I'm like, ooh, I really got that. Like, that part's really working well for me. Um, the whole
yeah,
painting, yeah, it's passable, but I kind of hone into like one little, and it's usually some like absent-minded mistake that I,
uh,
and I'm
that's
like,
funny.
oh, I love that little drip there. That's just
Yeah,
perfect.
something that just happened organically. Yeah, that
Yeah,
can be
exactly.
pleasing, particularly if you've been painstakingly working on something for a while.
What's
It's,
that?
I said, especially if you've been painstakingly working on something that's quite technical with background and layering, and just to be
Yeah,
happy to see something that happened organically could really just stand out to you. Yeah, I can.
exactly.
And
And
working
and
on a picture
and
of,
as I said, I use a lot of reference, whether it's building something. Oh, I can show you. Hold on. I have it over here. If I can carry it over without wrecking it. So for a book that I did recently, I ended up building a model. Let's see, take it off one of the walls. This is one of the walls.
that
Um,
is your design background, your art directing and creating.
yeah, when I was working at Disney, we had to, you know, work a lot with foam core for
Yes,
presentations. So I learned
yes,
how to cut foam core.
yes, you did.
Um, but you can see, like, I built this little
Wow,
house.
wow, look at the fire.
Yeah,
That,
I put these little lights in there, and
yeah.
um,
Oh,
made
it's great.
little.
Did your daughter have the most amazing dollhouse? She was
Uh,
little.
Actually, she had something better. We when she was born, we lived in a loft in Dumbo, which is, where Dumbo is. It's
Oh,
it's
yes, the cool area
in
of
Brooklyn,
yeah.
and we had a lot of space, and we had a lot of big boxes
Oh,
when we moved there. But also we used to use a company called Fresh Direct, and they would send groceries in boxes,
yes,
And so we
lovely.
had all these cardboard boxes, and from these boxes, I built this like house slash castle slash
So it's the indoor version of a tree house you built her.
indoor version of a tree house
Yes,
that had
awesome.
it
Oh
had a
my gosh.
bedroom, it had a kitchenette, it
My
had like
gosh.
Yeah, it was really
Well
fun.
done. That's so
The
great. Awesome.
cardboard and the glue gun, right? So for I think there might be some illustrators who are interested in how I work in Photoshop and how I
Yes.
layer
Yeah,
certain things.
would
I
love
know
to
I've been
see you do that. Yes. And just
I
to
know
do
I've been
time check, we are at 11:30, but we can go over a little bit because I think it's very important that we see this. And it's
I'll
been
go
so
quickly.
enriching and amazing to have you, John. You're so warm and very sharing a lot of amazing insights for your personal work and your own passions. This is what creates amazing illustrators and amazing picture books, is having a passion for your subject matter. And even if you're doing a commission, like you've done so many book covers, just knowing how to capture that, you really are a triple threat, really. You're author, illustrator, designer, actually now working into saving the planet, which we all should be a part of. So important, and carrying the legacy of the incredible Sir David Attenborough. This is an incredible book. I'm so glad to have got my copy. I need the sticker because now you've won an award for the library, right? The Library Guild. I saw
Yeah,
that.
the Junior
Yours.
Library Guild
Yes. Well, maybe
selected
have
it.
some stickers. So yeah, fantastic book. So yeah, let's see you do a
Thank you, Claire.
digital, yeah, a sample for
Sure.
us. So much.
So let me see. Okay. Um, so I wanted to show you a little bit about how I create an image like this one for Wild Places. If you look at the whole image, um, and you see here the amount of layers. So it starts off, with a sketch. Okay, so here's my sketch. I knew I wanted to have sort of a big cattle farm on the left-hand side and a small uh, farm that was growing many different crops on the right-hand side, and I wanted to have David on the right-hand side. And that's kind of what the information I quickly put down as my sketch. It, you know, this is how my drawings look if I don't have any reference and I'm just quickly trying to get them down on paper.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes this is enough for me because it's kind of like my cheat notes or crib notes telling me, okay, I'm gonna have this over here and this over here, and that's what it's gonna look like. And then I start to get into doing the final drawing. And so when I do a drawing, let's say this drawing of David. Now I found great reference. I didn't have to take a photograph of myself. I found this wonderful piece of reference from one of his documentaries. I just exchanged the oak leaf he's holding for a carrot. And I love the sort of rim lighting that he had on his body, this lighting along the edge. So I'll do a drawing, which look like that, pencil on paper. I'll bring that into the computer, and the next thing I'll do is I'll usually tint the drawing like a sepia tone. So for this one, I didn't want to tint the shirt a sepia tone, so I kind of left that a cooler color. Um, and we'll just zoom in here a little bit. So you can see in my layers, I have the layer number 3 here. This is the drawing itself. And I'll put that on a multiply layer so that anything underneath it will show through. I created a small little palette of colors that I wanted to use to paint him. And I use a Wacom tablet. I don't have like a fancy Intuit is that what it's called? I forget what it's called. Um, where you draw right on the screen. I have one of these. So it's like drawing on paper or painting on paper. And I will select a color. And what I usually do, so you can see I'm painting underneath the pencil drawing. So the pencil drawing is still there. We don't lose that. And it's almost working like stained glass, where the pencil drawing and the line work is there, but the color is showing through. And so I will pick like a base color to paint. And painting flesh tones really difficult because there's so many different colors that we don't think of that are in flesh tones, and there's cools and warms and different areas that get more red, like around the nose and cheeks. That's basically where the capillaries, your blood capillaries, are closer to the skin around your cheeks and nose, and sometimes a little bit around your eyelids, and so those places will be a little warmer, and then sometimes, at least on men, where the beard is, it'll be a little bit cooler colors, and of course, I wanted to paint the highlights. Now we have that great rim light, so it was important for me to put this against a medium background, kind of like going back to when I was working off the Bill Nelson work, and he would do that push and pull off a medium color.
Right.
So anyway, I'm not going to sit here and paint the whole thing, but I paint in the skin. There's the more finished David face, and then I'll paint the clothing and Carrot, of course, and then I have a more finished painting of David, which I could bring into my layered file. And when I'm working with all these different layers, I usually think about things in background, middle ground, foreground, and many layers in between. So I'm building up from the back. So I'm always starting with, say, the sky. So that's the bottommost layer, and here you can see it looks very almost airbrushed. I don't like things to look too airbrushed because then it looks computer and digital. So I will bring in textures and put those textures over different layers to give them less of a digital quality. And now it kind of almost takes on a look of like pastels or something like that. And these are the textures that I use. I make them using watercolor, different bits. Like I'll lay down watercolor on paper, and then I'll use a spray bottle and spray it in the air and let the water droplets fall down onto the paper, and it creates these really unique, interesting textures. And I use them a lot because it kind of breaks up the perfection of the computer art. Like, computers don't know how to make mistakes. We have to like integrate mistakes into it. And I see these as like little mistakes and blotches, and they make it more interesting. And of course, all my hand drawing that comes through, there's a lot of mistakes in there, which come through. And even my scanner, like I don't always clean my scanner. Like I remember working with Brian Floca, and we shared a studio, and he would clean his scanner all the time before he scanned something. Like if there's dust or dirt on my scanner and it shows up in the drawing, I'm like, cool, that might look good in there, and I'll just leave it. So nothing against cleaning it. If you want pristine drawing, then clean your scanner. I just don't do that all the time.
Yeah, this adds to your style. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it works because I'm painting digitally. He's painting with the actual watercolors. So his texture and his hand is in
Already in it, yes.
already in it.
Yeah.
So there's their basic background color, and then I'll start painting in the different elements. And I knew I was going to have tons of cows on the left hand side, and I didn't want to sit there and paint cow after cow after cow after cow. So I painted a little bit of
Right.
a library of cows that I could then propagate the whole area.
Yeah,
Of
that's
course,
sweet.
adding more texture on top of that, and then painting in more of like the hero cows, and starting to paint in the mountains on the right hand side and the background. And you can see all the different layers, building it up, and then finally making sure I have a good place to land the text,
Yeah, very
so
important.
that it doesn't cover a very busy area.
Yeah,
So that's kind of how I work in Photoshop, and to bring these images to life.
amazing.
And that's all I got today.
God, you gave us so much. I can't believe it. That was just in basically an hour. We got to see and hear so much. Thank you for sharing, John. I'm sure with your
You're
life being
welcome.
so busy creating and all of the involvements that you have with Wild Tomorrow, etc., that you don't have time to teach. So for us at the Society of Illustrators, this is a little gem. And it's
Oh,
been such a pleasure and an honor to have you. Honestly, to find out more about John and Hayley, check out their websites. John has many books, as you've heard about. They're all amazing. Some of you definitely have them in your collections already. Amazing books and everything that you continue to do. It's just been incredibly inspiring. And thank you for taking the time with us. You know, you've been on my list, and this book was just such a lovely book that came through in our original art show for 2024, one of the year's best illustrated books. You know, it's a juried show, and John's illustration stood out, and he went into the show, no questions asked. So, you know, there was great timing to have you come in and speak about two things. The wonderful work that you do, but also David Attenborough and all the wonderful things he's contributed to the world. And he is, you know, obviously a beloved figure. He's 99. Oh, wow. So
still working.
99, yeah, happy birthday, David. But
Yeah.
thank you, John. Everybody, you definitely need to follow more things and look up on John's website, which is Rocco Art, and follow him on Instagram. Get the book. It's really not just the beautiful story of David, but at the back, there's a lot of glossary, information, interesting things to talk about. Any parents or teachers who want to find out more, definitely check out. Actually, a lot of your books have more to talk about, which is what I love about this style of picture book. It's an incredible thing to have in your library, at school, and at home. So thanks again, John. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody. We hope to have you in person, John, if ever we could, at the Society of Illustrators to do some workshop. It would be really fun to have you.
I'd
So
love to.
take care, and thanks for sharing with us this morning. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.